Hey, how are you?
Hello, how are you, Billy?
I'm good. I'm good.
Yes, the man of the hour.
Uh,
Yes. Alrighty. So, to start off the interview about the Ken Forsse Come Dream with Me Tonight documentary, um, tell us a bit about yourself, Billy. How'd you get into Ken Forsse?
all right. So, born and raised here in northeastern New Jersey in the good old US of A. I think it's still the good old US of A.
Hmm.
So I'm going to be 41 years old this year. I was born in 1984, and a year later, the world's first animated talking toy, Teddy Ruxpin, hit shelves, and somehow my parents were able to get me Teddy in that first year. I don't know if it was for if it was before Christmas or right after, but I know it's a first gen Teddy because of the metal
Yeah.
cassette tape in the back, right? And Teddy was just a large part of my childhood, even though it kind of all went away by the early 90s
Yeah.
for the most part. I mean, what did I love about Teddy? I had the talking toy. I had five books and cassettes, and we've actually discovered while making the docuseries on Ken that five was actually about the average that children had. Most children had about, five, really no more than that.
Yeah.
Uh, when they, as far as the talking toy goes, I had the PVC figures, I had the airship, I had the vinyl map of what this artwork is behind me, right? And I love the live action special and the animated series for me. Like when I think about Teddy Ruxpin as a property, like and my childhood, the animated series was really near and dear to my heart because eventually the talking toy stops talking, the
Yeah.
servos stop, everything dries up. If you don't know how to fix it, many of the fans do know how to, now know how to do that. We didn't know how to do that in the early 90s, right?
Yeah.
We didn't really know how to do that. So for me, the animated series was always near and dear to my heart. And the funny thing was, up until the initial DVD releases, I had never actually seen all 65 episodes. That just wasn't something that I was able to done. The only reason I knew what happened in these episodes was a guy named Matthew the Captain Kurth in the 90s. He put a
Yeah.
Teddy Ruxpin Adventures of Teddy Ruxpin FAQ, an episode guide, and that's how many of
Right.
us learned what actually, happened in each of the 65 episodes. He put really great summations of those episodes. And, that was something, Teddy was just something that was part of my childhood. Don't get me wrong, as soon as the DVDs came out and I had all 65 episodes, I watched all 65 episodes. But what
Yeah.
happened was in August of 2016, my then girlfriend, now wife Maggie. Maggie's originally from Ecuador. I want to make sure I say it.
Yeah.
I don't know what I was talking about. I clearly mentioned Teddy Ruxpin, and she said, "What is that?" And I was explaining, and she said, "I think I know what you're talking about. I think I know what the animated series was. I don't remember a lot of it, but I remember some of it."
Yeah.
And I said, "Well, I have every episode on DVD." She goes, "Oh, can we watch it?" And I mean, if I wasn't already in love with this woman, that pretty much sealed the deal. So we actually spent over a week watching each of the 65 episodes, and
Yeah.
afterwards, I got to thinking, I know nothing I really know nothing about Ken Forsse. I know nothing
Yeah.
more than some, kind of trinkets and factoids that have, come out about Ken over the last up to then, 20 years or more. And I was just curious that no one had ever looked at his life in any meaningful and, extensive way. And up to that point, I had made three documentaries, and two of them were biographies. And so I'm a biographer. I just happen to make documentaries. And
Yeah.
so I wanted to find out what Ken was about. By then he'd already been gone for 2 years. He'd already
Yeah.
passed
Yeah.
away. And I found his widow, Jan Forsey. I found a Facebook account, no email. So I said, all
Yeah.
right, well, I shot Jan a message on Facebook Messenger, told her who I was. So this was like September of 2016, and didn't hear anything back from her. And a year went by, and it was out of my mind. I started working on another documentary, George Washington, The Farewell Address.
Yeah.
And November of 2017, so more than a year later, I am getting into the car and I see on my phone a message from Jan Force, and I go, oh my God,
Jen.
right?
Yeah.
I was like, oh my God. Like, she got back to me and she wants to talk about the possibility of, let's do something about Ken.
Yeah.
And February of 2018, New York City Toy Fair, right here at the Javits Center. I'm sitting across the table from Jan, and she says, I want you to tell Ken's story. And that was the beginning of 4 years of research and interviews and writing and editing and blood, sweat, and tears.
All for the greater good of Teddy, hey? Um,
All for the greater good of Teddy.
yes.
Absolutely.
So what was it like getting to the production of yeah, such a mammoth project of that? Since,
You know,
very little was documented.
so let's see. There, I think that there had been, let me start with this. So like the CNET video that came out with the article as the Wicked Cool Toys version of Teddy was
Yeah.
making its debut. The CNET article talks about the company Vault, right? And
Yeah.
they make a jest of it in that video that it really is just an unair conditioned
Mm.
storage unit.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what it is. I mean, I think using the term vault got a lot of fans excited, like, oh my God, you open the door and everything is there. No, that was not the case. There was some good stuff,
Yeah.
but a lot of what I accumulated over the course of 4 years was from dozens of different people and different archives. There was no one Ken Forsse archive in the sense of it was all right there. And
Yeah.
so the thing was, Ken's not with us anymore, right? Ken's gone. And so I don't
Mm.
have him to verify these things. So I had to really go about not just the research in terms of visuals, in terms of documents and all of that, but it was a matter of who am I going to interview, right?
Yeah.
Jan was absolutely going to be, one of the interviews, but the thing was, Jan didn't meet Ken until after the talking toy came out in the 80s. Ken had been, Jan was Ken's second wife. His first wife, Wendy, had passed away a few years before that. And so I didn't have these firsthand accounts. So Jan and Ken's daughter from his first marriage, Teresa, and then all the original alchemists like Mary Becker and Linda Pearson,
Yeah.
Phil Barron, the voice, the one and only voice of Teddy Ruxpin, the late Will Ryan, his good pal Grubby, right? And
Yeah.
and Tweeg in the storybooks, Tweeg in the storybooks. It was a matter of just being able to find all of these people. And once you found one or two of them, it
Yeah.
was like, oh, you should talk to so and so, you should
Yeah.
talk
It
to
just
so and so.
spreads.
Exactly. So it was 4 years of, and it's one of the reasons why it ended up taking me so long to do was because I had to find these people and I had to do their interviews, and then one interview would lead to the next. I'll give you a perfect example of how one thing led to another in terms of the interviews. It was already spring of 2021, so less than a year before the film episodes themselves started
Yeah.
coming out. So spring of 21, it was Vincent Conroy, who runs Grundo Gazette and good friend of mine and producer on the docuseries.
Yeah.
Vince just jokingly said, I really wish we could find out how the airship sound effect was invented. What was it? What is that sound?
You just
And I
wake
said,
up in a cold sweat one night. What was it?
and Vince was really, because I think you should try to find Russell Brower. And I go, what are you doing? He's looking at the credits in the
Yeah.
storybook. I said, I mean, I can try to find what happened was Russell was already friends with Linda Pearson on
Yeah.
Facebook. And so I asked Linda, could you reach out to Russell? Russell and Russell and I had a great interview. In the docuseries you
Yeah,
find
yeah,
out, Russell was telling us the airship sound effect. He took his parents' old player piano, didn't put any sheet music on it, didn't put any, he just ran the mechanism so that it's pumping air,
yeah,
and he just used a synthesizer to get the what we know as the airship sound. But it was Russell's interview that led me to Brad Hartman, who's now passed. Part five is dedicated to Brad and to Will Ryan. So Brad was the sound engineer who did all these recordings of the sound effects and the
yeah,
storybooks. And Brad and Russell led me to Lawrence Juber and his wife Hope, who did. It was funny because I was talking to them because Lawrence Juber had done guitar work on rock, on Talking Mother Goose. And I find it's Lawrence Juber who was in Paul McCartney's band Wings. And then I said in his interview, and he goes, "Oh, Rock Rabbit, we wrote the song, my wife and I. Let me get you Hope on the phone." And so one one thing leads, it all leads, one leads to the
yeah,
next, and you find all those really great stuff. My whole thing was in January of 2018 when I was talking to Jan for the first time in person about all this. I got 90 minutes. We'll do a 90-minute documentary. It'll be great. It'll be tight. It'll be concise. We got this. It's a nine
9
hour,
hours
it's a
later.
9 hour, 9 part
Yeah,
docuseries, right?
9 hours. Jeez.
But I think that speaks to the life of Ken Forsse, right? Ken
Yeah,
was not just a one-trick pony in that 1985 he created Teddy Ruxpin, the talking toy. Teddy was already 2 decades, Teddy was over 20 years old at the time, the idea of Teddy
yeah,
Ruxpin. Ken was working as a teenager for a furniture and almost toy company.
yeah,
He's a Walt Disney in-betweener right out of high school. He becomes an Imagineer after a stint in the army. He almost works on a Lord of the Rings adaptation when these books were still brand new in the 50s. And Sid and Marty Krofft after he helps build the Magic Kingdom in Disney World in Florida.
yeah,
Ken's was a amazing creative life, and we could have probably made a longer docu-series but it was just we told as
yeah,
much as we possibly could with what we had.
yeah, yeah. So, what was it like? The vault. I guess we'll get into the
Want to
vault
talk about the
now.
vault? We'll talk
Yeah,
about the
let's talk
vault.
about the vault.
The vault, the vault, I think, has been consolidated once again. When we got there in October of 2018, it was four different storage units, no air condition,
Yeah,
just bleh, right? Technical term. Bleh.
yeah,
And I only got into three of the four units. We were told at one point by someone, "Oh, that fourth one's just old tax paperwork." So it was like, well, we trust the person, right? Shouldn't we trust the person?
mm,
Uh, a lot of it was product,
yeah,
like still in the box teddies and fobs and the action figure, the PVC figures, right? A lot of it was product,
yeah,
but there wasn't just product in there, right? So in our
yeah,
first year in there, Vince and my first year in there, in the storage units, we found a box of photos and Crenshaw, who I found out to be Crenshaw, the alligator, and some of the animatronic band for the Pompeii nightclub. We saw, so those photos made me realize in that moment there was so much more going on
yeah,
before, in Alchemy 2 in the 80s before Teddy Ruxpin, right? But
yeah,
that first trip, the big thing that we found in the storage units, it was cardboard box, 30 something VHS tapes in there. Some
yeah,
of them labeled, some not. And some of the stuff on that was like Pompeii Band, Pooh Corner, and I'm like salivating. I'm like, okay. I said, I took it, I got Jan's permission, went right to UPS
yeah,
and shipped it back to my place here in New Jersey and had them all converted, digitized.
yeah, yeah,
And that really started opening because without these tapes, I have no visual context. So the questions were just not, the interview questions were not developed without being able to see all these visuals.
yeah,
But a year later, we did go back, Vince and I, to California, to the back to the storage units. I had said to Jan, I go, Jan, look, I just want to do one more look through. I know so
Yeah.
much more now a year later. And she goes, sure, no problem. Do you know what you're looking for? I said, no, I have no idea what I'm really looking for, but I know when I'll find it, right? I'll know it
Yeah.
when I see it. And so we went back out there and we did find a lot more really cool stuff. You see it in throughout the docuseries, the original sketches of the
Mm.
characters from the 19 when it was still in the 1970s when it was still going to be a puppet show and not an animated talking toy yet. When before Teddy was before Iliops looked like bears, right? They were more
Yeah. Yeah.
monkey-like, simian Greek-like still, right?
Yeah.
And it was that fourth unit, the one that we hadn't gone into because they were all supposedly taxes, tax papers from the
That's where
80s.
all the gold was, wasn't it?
I found in there. So it's like and it's in a separate building from the other three, right? So we
Yeah.
go in, oh, lift up the grate, and it's just boxes, and I'm like, I look at Vince and I'm, excuse me, I'm looking at Vince going, I'm probably never coming back out here again. So I'm just doing it. And I'm mountain climbing. I'm up in there.
Oh my God.
I'm at the end of this day, I am just filthy because it is
Oh.
just, it had no, there was a chain link, there was like a rope above it. So like nothing could fall in it, but it
Yeah.
wasn't even a ceiling. So dust and dirt is
Ugh.
accumulating. A lot of product. A
Yeah.
lot of product. I got my Ken Forsse made Chudini, the little mouse in the cheese wedge. I got that. Jan let me have one of those. That was
Mm.
fun. But what I found that day was in that unit, it was a binder. It was the 1972 The Adventures of Teddy Ruxpin, because you'd already renamed Simeon Griep. No, I'm lying. I'm sorry. No, 1972. It was still The Adventures of Simeon Griep. It was still Griep. He
Yeah.
had not switched names yet. So, and I'm holding it in my hand, this copy of the 1972, incomplete. You didn't finish all of the outlines, but it's like this is it. I look at Jan and I go, remember when I said I didn't know what I was looking for, but I
Yeah.
would know when I found it? I was like, this is it. I go, this is the holy grail of this trip.
Mm.
And that was real. I mean, that was just incredibly eye-opening because you're able to compare the earliest documentation that we have. I have nothing
Yeah.
earlier than 1972 in writing. We have the earliest documentation of Greep, which is, the future Teddy Ruxpin,
Yeah.
the future adventures of Teddy Ruxpin. I can compare now the 1972 outlines and character lists to the 1979 puppet show script, and the 1979 puppet show script is just ever so slightly different than the
Yeah.
1985 live action special script.
Yeah.
And so you get that evolution as a researcher and a biographer. I'm like, now I can see how these things have progressed.
Yeah.
But the storage units, I was filthy. It was.
Yeah.
It was like I gotta take a shower after this. But it
Yeah.
was fun. It was a lot of fun. I probably could have broken my neck climbing on these boxes, but yeah, but I survived, and and
Yeah.
I'm a stronger person. Character development, right?
Yeah. 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 It was worth it in the end too. Yeah.
Yeah,
But
absolutely.
it's kind of weird, the vaults, like how it's set up, like how stuff like that is just like buried right at the back, out of sight.
There was there. You can't blame anybody for it. I mean, it's a company that hasn't existed as a real company since the
Yeah.
really the 80s. Mary Becker ran that company prior to Ken taking things over again in the early 2000s. It was just, they had an office space and they consolidated a lot of it. And then
Yeah.
it just ends up in storage because you don't need all of this stuff, right? You
Yeah.
don't need all of this stuff. All of the original, like the storybook, the original art, the storybook art and the reels and all of that. That's in a separate climate controlled unit somewhere in Los
Oh.
Angeles. I never went there. I had no reason to go there because
Yeah.
I don't need to see the masters and the artwork.
Yeah.
I was looking for the early drafts, right?
Yeah.
So like
Yeah.
the stuff that would make you money, that's in a climate controlled
Mm.
facility, that's preserved. The other stuff was just
Yeah.
One of the other things we found in the last in the second and last California trip, I found like the company employee guide, which was really helpful because we used that in, I want to say, part six, when we talk about the circular structure of the company rather than like a pyramidal
Yeah.
hierarchy. Ken believed in this equal, equitable round
Yeah.
table, right?
Yeah.
Like King Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table. So that was really helpful too, that kind of stuff was
Mm.
preserved, even though it was all in boxes. That's the thing.
Yeah.
Some of it got scattered and it's around, and I'm just like, well, these things 30 years, 40 years, almost 40 years later, what are you going to do? Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But a lot of it is now everything that we found in one way or another is shown in part in the docuseries. I didn't
Yeah.
leave. I don't think I left. I don't think I left any alchemy project out. Don't quote me. I know we're recording. If I left anything out, I'll have Vince put something together on Grundo Gazette.
All right. Yeah. So you mentioned like the vault's been shrunken down again since you were last here. Like, is there any reason it's been continuously shrunken down? Like, is this
I guess it's just a matter of not wanting to pay for for multiple units for stuff that's just product. Because I said
yeah,
I would probably Vince would agree with me. A majority of what's in there is just sealed up Teddy Ruxpin product
yeah,
that never made it to never end up
yeah? It
at
just
market.
never
I'm
went
talking about
anywhere.
prototype. I'm talking about it's just the talking
Yeah, yeah,
toy. It's the fob puppets. They're still in their boxes. Some of it's bent up and stuff, but a lot of it's just product. I don't know. Not sure why I hold on to it. Nostalgic purposes,
mm,
purposes of nostalgia. I don't know. But when I say consolidated, I just mean, if you had, I guess if you found tax papers from 1987, why do we need tax papers from 1987? You can probably just throw those, you can
yeah,
probably spread those and toss those.
yeah. Interesting. Also, that you mentioned it's just product, right? I've heard that there were apparently prototypes in there, such as a Newton gimmick doll and stuff like that, and apparently it's just been thrown out over the years. Do you know anything
I
about
don't
that?
know. I never physically saw prototypes. I never saw the Newton gimmick prototype that you saw that we know, that the infamous Newton gimmick
Yeah.
prototype, one of the two or three Charlie Brown prototypes, or the Muppet Magic ones.
Mm,
Those, and from what we were told, stuff like that over the years, that just got thrown out. Breaks my heart. I'm not in
yeah.
charge though, right? I'm not part of this
Yeah.
company, so they make the decisions. I guess what's the? I guess you can't. I don't blame anyone for not seeing the
Value.
value in keeping
Yeah.
this kind of stuff. And I would have kept it, but I don't really fault anybody for not holding on to that. I did hold the Rock Rabbit doll prototype. It was just kind of it was mostly just felt. It was in, it was the full body, like,
Yeah.
feet paws, right? Paws to ears. Wasn't a talker. If it was meant to be a talker, I didn't know that. It looked more like a plush without the guts.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
Perhaps.
no, I never saw the Muppets, Newton gimmick or Charlie Brown prototypes,
Yeah.
and we looked, right? We looked.
Yeah.
For all intents and purposes, they don't exist in this world anymore, which is a shame. But at
Yeah.
least we have photos. We have photos. We have some footage, right? But unfortunately, the prototypes just don't seem to exist anymore.
Yeah. That really does suck, really. S- yeah, I guess it's how it is. Another thing from the vault, just keeping the topic going.
Sure,
Um,
no, I'm happy to answer any questions that you have if I
yeah.
can.
The Teddy Ruxpin movie script.
Hmm.
Yeah, that he's had and then disappeared off the face of the planet.
The
Um,
movie script?
yeah, the one from the backpack toys era, Teddy,
Ah,
2006.
okay. So there's two.
Yeah.
Okay, so there's two. When we talk about movies, there's two that I
Yeah,
can
yeah, I
talk
should
about.
have
So the
specified.
one, yeah. So no, that's okay. So the one that we quote from in part nine of the docuseries, in
Yeah.
part nine of the docuseries, where Teddy, Grubby, and Gimmick find the lost colony of Iliops, and there's a giant woolly what's it at some point. That is from the 1980s when they were putting together this idea of of a movie. Think of it. It, I can't tell you for sure if it was going to be a movie sequel to like the first story arc in its earliest stages, right? The
Yeah.
missing person story arc, or if it was meant to be something that they were going to do midway through the first season, the one season of the show or
Yeah.
after. I don't know exactly when they were planning on it fitting in.
Mm.
But the one that we highlight in the docu-series that we quote from, right, with the Lost Colony of Iliops, that was from the 1980s. The
Right.
one that I recently posted, we do use that device, that vehicle that you see on the cover page.
Yeah.
That one I had my artist Najee Smith, he kind of recreated that for just a one-shot image.
Ah.
That's the thought flyer. That's called a thought flyer. That's what Ken called it from what I've been told. And it was
Right.
powered by the crystals, and you had, I guess there was a device I had not, I said to Najee, I go, just recreate what Professor X uses in Cerebro. I go, what else are we going to use? We're just trying to use our imaginations for the purposes of conveying the concept. But
Yeah.
the thought flyer was supposed to be in that second, in what can it says the Teddy Ruxpin movie, episode 66, through 70. That was what Ken had been working on, yeah, in the early 2000s before he passed away. The thought flyer, from my understanding, because I will tell you, I have not read that outline. I have
Right.
not read that outline. That it was understood that that one was going to sit to the side for right now. But
Uh,
I was told a few things, and I can tell you, I think the airship was going to get destroyed at some point, and the
oof.
thought flyer, I know it's like sacrilegious to say that.
Yeah.
I you're saying it. The airship was going to be destroyed, or at least temporarily disabled, and Gimmick would invent the thought flyer. That was the idea behind why the thought flyer was being created. I always joke with Vince. I say, look, the thought flyer looks like the space pod from 2001: A Space Odyssey.
Yeah. I see that. I see that. Yeah. Um, so for the later part of the Ken Forsse documentary, the last episode, it kind of just like sort of skims its way from like I'd say about 1990 to when Ken Forsse passed away. Is there any reason for that, or is it just kind of to try and wrap things up?
Yeah, so what we were trying to do in part nine, right? What I was trying to tell in part nine was that Ken never gave up on Teddy,
Yeah.
right? That was the thing. We didn't want to say that Ken had not given up on Teddy. In part eight, we give you Branson Bear, right? That was
Yeah.
what Ken spent most of the 90s up until the Yes Entertainment deal. Ken was spending the 1990s putting Branson Bear into existence. It didn't take off the way he had hoped. That's just the market, right? That wasn't any
Hmm.
fault through Ken. He created a wonderful him and the artist John Moore.
Yeah.
They created a great product along with Jan in Branson Bear. And with part nine, though, the idea was just to let everybody know, we've taken you on this John, on this long journey, and we
Yeah.
wanted to emphasize that Ken never gave up on Teddy, that he always saw the value in not just the toy and the toy market and making money. It wasn't about that. Ken
Yeah.
loved Teddy Ruxpin. He loved his creation. He wanted nothing more than for Teddy to be that evergreen, as Jan calls it, an evergreen product, this perennial toy.
Yeah.
And I think that there, I think that it says a lot, and I promise I'll circle back to part nine specifically. I
Yeah.
think there's a lot to be said about the fact that every time Teddy does come back to the market, including Wicked Cool's version,
Yeah.
I wasn't in love visually with it,
Yeah.
but
Most aren't.
plenty of children and collectors loved it,
Yeah.
and I'm just happy that Teddy had another, excuse me,
Yeah.
another award-winning release, right? I
Yeah.
think that it says a lot that every time Teddy does come back, he always does well in the
Mm.
initial release. I think there's a lot of great value in the IP, in the world of Teddy Ruxpin, in the adventures of Teddy Ruxpin series.
Yeah.
I think that if less effort, maybe I shouldn't say this, but I'll say it anyway. I think if less effort was given to bringing back the talking toy again, and more was given to just give us a show,
Yeah.
give us a show, continue the animated series. That would have
Mm.
been great, right? We know
Yeah.
Vince and I at one point tried to do that in a graphic novel, but things happen, and we don't follow through with it all. That we don't always get to go to fruition with
Yeah.
ideas. But Teddy, there's value in the world of Teddy Ruxpin and the story
Yeah, definitely.
and the morals and stuff. But with part nine, it was all about wrapping things up
Yeah.
and just making sure that we told the story that Ken loved his creation, he loved his Iliop, the little Iliop that made good. He
Yeah.
loved Teddy, and we talk about Yes Entertainment. We talk about Backpack Toys, talk about the movie. I know everybody was excited to see
Yeah.
that sizzle reel. I know I was excited to see the sizzle reel after all those years of seeing like the one or two still frames, right? You're like, oh,
Yeah.
what was that
Yeah.
all about? And then and then it was about having to say goodbye to Ken, right? Yeah, he
Yeah.
passed unfortunately rather young, he was only in his 70s when he passed away. And just wanted to make sure that we highlighted that. I think for me, the biggest part about part nine, the biggest theme was Ken's legacy is not just the toy. It's
Yeah.
not just the characters. His legacy is in the people that worked for him and worked with him, the
Yeah.
alchemists, right? So many wonderful people came in and out of alchemy too. During its golden era, right? The heyday of 1980s. So
Mm.
many people who had been Disney Imagineers and then would also go on to later be Disney Imagineers. I think of Valerie Edwards, the sculptor, right? Ken and her father were very
Yeah.
good friends. He gave Valerie, I think, her first real job in that, in the art field. And he's the one that made Valerie a sculptor. He said, I want you to try doing this. You've never sculpted before. She went on to work for the Walt Disney Imagineering for years, right?
Yeah.
It's a wonderful legacy, right? The people that worked with Ken at Alchemy and before that with the Crofts and even in Disney Imagineering. Part
Yeah.
nine was all about wrapping it up.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, time is really flying by. I've only got 5 minutes before Zoom kicks us off. So I guess to start wrapping things up, I feel like I've barely gotten through most of the questions I had lined up. So maybe we could do another interview sometime.
If you
Um,
want to listen, if you want to log off and do this all over, do we have a waiting? Is there a waiting period? Do you have to wait
um,
again?
I have no idea, but for recording Zoom, I've noticed like it has like a file size and it goes down every interview I've done. So
It goes down every interview.
I don't know how much.
I'm happy to do another one. I'm absolutely happy to do it. I like talking about
Yeah.
Teddy. I like talking about
Yeah.
Ken. Go ahead,
Yeah.
please. Oh, I did right. I promised you I was going to show you some stuff.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Give me one second. All right. All right. Can you see that?
Yeah. Should.
All right. So here we are, right? There's the walk
Oh my.
around Teddy,
Yeah.
little boy there. Let's go down. I want you to, I'll read the caption for you, right?
Yeah.
Caring Bear, Andrew Salvino got the surprise of his life yesterday when a life-size Teddy Ruxpin visited him at the Royal Children's Hospital. For many years, Teddy, the world's top-selling and first animated and talking toy, has been teaching children messages of friendship, child safety, and goodwill, and yesterday's visit certainly lifted five-year-old Andrew's spirits. And the reason I share this with you is because this was
In
the Royal Children's
Australia.
Hospital in
Yeah.
Australia.
That's
Uh,
not far from me too. That's really
right?
cool.
I'm sure if you go knocking on a door at that hospital, they might have more stuff from this
Maybe.
time period. So this
Maybe.
was the early 90s, right? This
Yeah.
was, excuse me, this was the early 90s. And the group of fans and collectors who just recently started uploading some wonderful stuff,
Mm.
they had just put out that special
Yeah. The
tape where he's welcoming everyone, Australia Toy Fair.
yeah.
And so I'll show you one more thing from that. And then we have let me see, let me bring this
Got
up.
5 minutes. Should be enough.
There we go. Is this the, let's see. Hold on one second. Give me one sec. I thought that was the script. One second, and I will get you the document that I was looking
Got a
for.
little
Bear
sneak peek of
with me.
something else, Teddy.
Let's see. Where is that document? It's like when I thought I had it. Let's see.
It would be funny if Zoom didn't capture any of this.
Oh, yeah, that would just be my luck at this point, right?
Hmm. I'll let you
Oh,
know.
goodness. Bear with me for just a moment. I know it's here. I looked at it yesterday. Where are you? Is this it? Well, let me ask you while you do this, while I look for this infamous document.
Okay.
Why Teddy Ruxpin for you? I'm gonna turn the spotlight on you. I'm gonna be the
Okay.
interviewer now. Why
All right.
Teddy?
Well, for Teddy, for me, this started back around 2018, right? I used to be like kind of freaked out by talking toys. Like my brothers used to torment me with a Tickle Me Elmo. So
Uh,
I always stayed away. But I remember one time, me and my mum went to a thrift store, and there were just two original 80s teddies on a cane chair, like a little miniature cane chair. And I was like, "Oh, what's this?" Because I didn't know he talked at the time. I picked him up, so it's a talking toy. So I popped him back down. But like, man, like it didn't creep me out or anything. Like there was just something about that cute little face. And so we go back home. I don't think much of it. And then YouTube decides to do its job with the recommendation system. I get a Teddy song suggested to me. I click on it. What is this? You know, it's just such the art, the music, like bloody hell. I just thought like it was just like some talking toy. I didn't think there was all this, but obviously that was before you made the Ken doc and everything, so there wasn't really much out there really. Um, so I stopped thinking about Teddy for a bit. 2022, just scrolling YouTube, I find the Ken doc, and if it wasn't for your documentary, I wouldn't be here right now.
Well, look,
So
I'm glad that I'm glad that the documentary has gone far beyond borders of the United States. I'm very
yeah,
happy about this. This was
yeah,
the document I was looking for.
here it is.
This is dated March of 1990. This would have been for Toy Fair in Australia the following month in April. And so you've got your walk around Teddy Ruxpin's script,
Mm.
right? So, hi, my name is Teddy Ruxpin. Wow, it sure is nice to being here today with all of my Australian friends. Australia is a beautiful country, and I'm glad to be here. I'm really enjoying my trip down under. And then you have for the talking toy three different versions, and one of these is the newly released video
Mm.
on the YouTube channel of the fans of the on that quartet
Yeah,
that have gone and accumulated some really great stuff. And so this was our way of being able to date this. We actually ended up doing this yesterday, of all things. And
yeah.
I just wanted to show you this and share it with you.
Hmm.
But
Yeah,
there it is.
that's really cool. Like it's cool that you've like actually got the paper for it, on hand. That's really cool.
Straight from Dr. Bearwell himself when he accompanied Teddy down to Australia.
Yeah. Yeah, that's something if we do another interview, I really want to ask you about Dr.
Yeah.
Bearwell and his stuff. But
Yeah, we can absolutely have another conversation. I know we're running short on time. I just
yeah.
want to thank you for the opportunity of doing what
Yeah.
we'll start calling episode one
Yeah.
of the
Might as,
interview. Absolutely.
yeah, do a whole 9-part series.
Hey, nothing I'm not used to, right?
Yeah, yeah, true, true. Yeah, thanks for taking the time to speak with me about Teddy.
Anytime, always happy to talk to fans, talk about Ken, talk about Tenny, and anything else.
Yeah.
Let me know. We'll do this soon. Okay?
Yes, definitely. All right, see ya,
Take
Billy.
care.
See ya.
Bye bye.
Bye.